Relationships aren't always sunshine and rainbows. Just like in nature, you can't have rainbows without a little rain.
Journey with us,
Shani Goodson
and Dr. Sunjata as we share stories and insights about our thriving, unconventional love life and our unique take on relationships and consensual non-monogamy. What's up?
Hey y'all.
Welcome back to another episode of SunShan and Rainbows.
Welcome back.
So happy to be with you all once again to jump into our next topic, which is going to be talking about privacy, transparency, and confidentiality within this network of relations that we have in the polyamorous and consensual non-monogamy space. So it's something that could be really, really complex, and we're going to unpack it all for you all today. But before we do, I got to check in to see how Miss Shani is feeling. What energy are you bringing into this episode today?
I'm going to try to be wise.
Okay.
And prudent about, that's the energy I'm bringing to this topic, or trying to bring to this topic.
Okay.
What about you?
Wise and prudent. Well, I am, first of all, I'm feeling good today. Again, I told y'all, we said before that days where we're really, really tired or not doing good, we're not going to record. So we're feeling really good today. So this is a good day to record. And
some days really are not.
Yes.
Some days are just not a good day. So.
Yeah, some days like yesterday.
Okay, right.
But I'm feeling good, and I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's something that's come up in my relationships so much, and it's something that consistently comes up periodically in the various Facebook groups that I'm in for polyamorous people. So I don't really type much in those groups and respond there. So this is my chance to weigh in on the topic. So I'm excited about that.
Okay. Let's start with talking a little bit about the difference. So basically, we're going to try to focus on privacy, transparency, and confidentiality. So I'm actually going to start with confidentiality. That is somebody asking you specifically not to say something about a specific topic. We have confidentiality within our platonic relationships as well, where we don't, you have a friend who might tell you something, but they don't want you to tell another friend or anybody else. This one is always difficult. It's not always difficult, but it can be, because sometimes people don't say, please don't tell anybody this, but they assume that based on their perception of the sensitivity of the topic that you wouldn't tell anyone. And sometimes we can bump up on misalignments when it comes to confidentiality, I would say. So I'll stop there. What do you have to say about confidentiality?
Yeah, confidentiality for me, I'll say, is pretty cut and dry. And what makes it cut and dry is when someone says, this is confidential. So that's, for me, it's something that someone specifically signals to me and says, this is confidential, or can you keep this between you and I? Keep this between us. To me, that signals confidentiality, and that means that I should not say what I heard from that person in any way, and vice versa.
So somebody has to say that.
Yes.
For you to keep it confidential. Have there been times when you've been like, ooh, I don't think you would want somebody to know that, so I'm not going to say anything, even though you didn't tell me to?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So you do kind of use your own judgment, discretion when it comes to confidentiality. However, if somebody says this is confidential, there's no negotiating around that.
There's no negotiating around that.
I agree with that. Like, that's how I feel about it too, where there are some things where I know this person well enough that even though they didn't tell me not to tell anyone, I still wouldn't, because I just know that person's like risk, that person's like tolerance for being talked about, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
All right. And then let's talk a little bit about privacy. So privacy is like an expectation that some parts of your relationship don't need to be shared. And it's like a little step down from confidentiality. So like maybe privacy is more about the things that my love and I do, and maybe like certain routines or conversations that we have just between us. This one's a little bit, yeah. I do have an expectation of privacy. Sometimes if I hear someone talking about something about me that I thought was private, I might say, "Ooh, I thought that was just us. Like, why does the other person need to know about it?" I think privacy is more about like, why does this other person need to know it? That's kind of,
Okay. So when I think about privacy, I think about like that's that's about me. It's about me determining what I want to keep private about my life and my relationships when I'm talking to you or you or you or you. So I think that's like a personal discretion thing when it comes to privacy. And I personally do not have any expectation of others to keep anything that I say or do private unless I signal to them that I want it to be confidential. And I think that I know we're going to get into the more depths of this, but I think that would clear up a lot if people got in the habit of, again, naming things that are confidential. But when it comes to privacy, that tends to be a personal judgment type thing in my estimation in terms of what I decide I want to keep private and what you decide you want to keep private based on your tolerance around privacy.
yeah. And then transparency is kind of like what you and your love decide needs to be shared with each other. I think that's like more about the disclosing the things that concern the other person. Like in the name of transparency, I would need to tell Sunjata something that might affect him. That's how I think about transparency. Privacy is I don't have to tell him because they don't affect him. And transparency is I do need to tell him because they do affect him. That's kind of a line for me between privacy and transparency. And I think some people struggle with figuring out where transparency starts and where privacy ends. So we'll get into that in a bit as well about the complexity of this.
Yeah. I think you named that well. And I would agree that it's similar for me in terms of when I'm thinking about the conversations that you and I have or the conversation I may have with another love, it's like I want to be transparent because for me, vulnerability is a form of intimacy. And I think that transparency and vulnerability, they're closely related. But again, it's knowing that the line between privacy and transparency that distinguishes the two. I like to be very transparent because I want people to know me. I want to show up as my most authentic self, and I think transparency helps with that. But I think there also needs to be a level of discernment in terms of, not crossing the line over into confidentiality in the name of transparency.
I agree. So why is it complex? There's so many reasons why this is complex. I think one of them is that people have different ideas of what privacy and transparency and confidentiality mean. Like what Sunjata said about it, you have to say, this doesn't go anywhere. I think some people would take issue with that. I think some people would say, no, how could you not know that was confidential? How could you tell somebody that? Because obviously that was confidential. Obviously I don't want anybody to know that. And that is where I think more maybe transparency comes in and being transparent about your expectations, because different people definitely have different expectations of what should be shared and what shouldn't be shared.
Yeah.
I think that's a really big part of the getting to know you process.
Yeah, indeed. And what it comes back to me is like communication. And, it's interesting because I believe that a lot of people will say that they're communicators. But oftentimes when we're in relationships with other people, that relationship is a mirror. And I would say all the time, relationships are mirrors. And in one relationship, you may feel like you communicate well, but another relationship may require a different type of communication or a different level of communication. And this is a perfect example of when it does, in terms of, like you said, that coming to some understanding around what someone feels like is confidential versus what's not. And also the assumption that Shani just gave in her example, where it's like, you should know that's confidential. No, in my opinion, no. Communicate with me and I'll call someone in who gives that type of energy to me And I'll say things like, I need communication. I need you to over communicate with me, because please don't make assumptions. Let me know how you need to be treated. Don't assume that I know your expectations. So I just want to, in this moment, just really empower and advocate for communication, especially doing what we do, navigating consensual non-monogamy and polyamory.
I do think that these also apply in platonic friendships. I personally have had more drama, quote unquote, in the platonic department when it comes to privacy, transparency, and confidentiality than I have in the romantic arena. So I'll give a kind of a vague example. Like sometimes my friend might tell me something that they consider private and they don't want me to tell Sunjata. But they don't say, it's confidential. And I know for a fact that sometimes I will tell a friend this is confidential and they still tell their partner. Like I know that because they trust that their partner is going to keep my confidence. And that has caused some rifts in this community. And that's between friends more than it has been between romantic loves for me. So I think a lot of friends fall out because of this. Lots of friends fall out because they're like, I can't trust you. You're going to tell my business to people. And a lot of people don't, especially in this like small community, they don't want their business out there. They don't want people prejudging them. They don't want to feel like people already know them before they've even gotten a chance to get to know them. And so a lot of people don't like to be talked about. And I think even when people don't say, keep this confidential, it's kind of important to try to ask questions and make observations to gauge what is this person's like comfort level when it comes to what I can and cannot share. And also notice what they're sharing with you.
Right.
Sometimes I'll pay attention. I'm like, why are you telling me your partner's business like this? This makes me uncomfortable because if you're telling me your partner's personal business, what you gonna do with my confidential business that I don't want anybody to know? So, like I said, this is a really big part of the getting to know you process because you will bump up on major misalignments and like your whole relationship can crumble. And I'm not just talking about romantic ones.
Facts. And, there was a conversation in a group, in one of the groups recently where this came up. And, some people were like straight up, I don't even want to be in a relationship with people right now because I don't want my meta knowing my business. Like there's some people who are afraid to like connect on the strength of they don't want their meta knowing their business. So it's a real thing. And the way I hold it is, and we're all going to be different, right? But the way I hold it is I personally have very little that I say or do within relationships that I'm going to put into the confidential category. However, when it does happen, I do say, please keep this confidential.
Yeah, he'll say, keep this between us. Please make sure you keep this between us.
Yeah, but outside of that, y'all, here's the thing. We're humans.
Yeah.
And we're social by nature. We're social beings by nature. So I think that it's unrealistic to expect people to not want to talk about the things they hear. Like that's a very natural and human thing to do. And I think that there may be ways that people can do it where they're not naming names or they're speaking at a really high level about things. And I think that's one of the things I try to do when I gauge, the privacy, comfort of certain people. But on a baseline level, for me personally, I feel like anything that I say or do within the context of a relationship, I expect and I don't mind if it's shared with other people because I think the reason is because I really feel comfortable with the way that I move. And I also feel comfortable with people judging me in the sense that I feel like the right people, if they want to be close to me or get to know me, if they hear something that doesn't feel like it's in alignment with who they think I am, they'll come to me about it. And I feel like if there's someone who hears something about me and they want to make a blanket judgment about me without getting to know me, I'm okay with that too, because in my mind, I'm like, they haven't gotten to know me. So what they heard about me is all they know. And if they do come in my sphere and they do choose to get to know me, they'll learn about the broader version of me. So I don't carry around these fears or these anxieties about being judged or misjudged or misunderstood to a degree, because I think all of that is just a part of the human dynamic. And I know that there will eventually be room for, if me and this person come into a close proximity enough relationship, for them to get to know me in a fuller way. Or if me and that person don't come into a close proximity relationship, it doesn't matter what they think about me anyway. That's kind of how I hold it all.
I agree. Like, I think that there are some people who are worried about what they say getting out because they don't like how they are moving themselves. To me, that's maybe a sign of some guilt, that maybe you're not truly acting in alignment with yourself. Because I agree, there are very few things that I say behind someone's back. I'm putting that in quotes for those of you who are listening, that I wouldn't say to their face. And I am a believer that on the same vein as what Sunjata just said, that we're humans and we're social creatures. What else is there to talk about except other people? Like, that's all there is to talk about. Now, that doesn't mean that we're talking about gossip. I think the intent behind what you're saying matters. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I will talk through someone else's situation with Sunjata so that we can reflect on our own actions. Like, how would you deal with that? Have you dealt with that before? What kind of advice would you give this person? It's not really like, oh, look what this person is doing. Judgment. Oh, I don't like that. Ew. That's gossip, right? And the malicious kind of messy intention behind gossip is the problem, not talking about people. Mm-hmm. So I do believe that I'm going to be talked about regardless, and I can't control people's perception of me at all. All I can do is be me and be comfortable in the way that I move. And like Sunjata said, if you're meant for me, you're going to get me. When you get into a close proximity relationship with me, you're either going to perceive me and like me or perceive me and not. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. I definitely know that both of us have been talked about, and still the person who heard about us still came to get to know us on their own. Mm-hmm. I could think of an example, probably at least one for both of us, where they still came and they wanted to find out more anyway, despite mm-hmm. what they heard.
Right.
And, things play out the way they're going to play out. Who's for you will be for you. And mm-hmm. I think that it's really important to be comfortable in your own skin and in the way you move.
Hope you're enjoying this episode. Let's take a quick break to tell you about something that we've been working on.
We're excited to announce our course and coaching program, Relationship Bliss, where we help polyamorous people transform their relationships into highly compatible, peaceful, deeply aligned, and blissful partnerships.
We do this by sharing techniques for effective communication, deeper connection, and conflict resolution. The program offers a self-paced course with 5 learning modules, 25 training videos, and live virtual coaching sessions with us, Shani and Sunjata.
Learn more at go-growdialogue.com.
Thanks for listening. Now back to the show. Yeah. So let's talk about like agreements, boundaries when it comes to communications and other relationships. I know we've kind of hinted on it and touched on it, but let's talk about it more explicitly. I think that it's important, if anything, that this episode just raises awareness, for us who are navigating this relational dynamic, and that, you have conversations with your loves around, your level of privacy. So for example, I know people who will say, I'm a very private person, right? And for me, that's a signal to me to know that if I'm talking about a scenario that I was involved in with this person, to keep it really high level, to not use their name because they're really, really private. And then there's also been instances where I've been in relationships with folks and I said, look, I have one person who's a really good friend who is like my person that I unpack things with, that I get to vent to. And this person does a really good job of not sharing information with other people. Like this person is one of the best people I've met about not sharing information about other people. And one of the reasons I know is because they don't share information with me about other people in their lives, about the different relational dynamics, etc. And we even have some shared love, some shared friends that I know they hear about stuff from both of us, but I never hear about what that person has vented to them about me. So I have said in certain relationships, like, look, is it okay if I go to this person when I need to vent about what we're dealing with? Like, that's something that you could try on. Because again, we're social creatures. And one of the ways that I learn about, and I process situations is about talking about it with other people. So it's really hard and it's unrealistic to expect, again, that some people aren't going, I would say most people aren't going to need at least one or two people that they can go to and vent and process. And it helps them to get that mirror and reflect back what the other person's hearing, et cetera, to help them learn through whatever they're dealing with. And, sometimes that person, I have a person that is nowhere near, a childhood friend who's nowhere near this polyamory, community. And I can understand how some people may want to say, I don't want you to talk about this with anyone in the community. And, so it's little nuances like that that I think can be talked about in terms of like boundaries when it comes to communications in our relationships.
Yeah, I think it's important that if you're connected to people, you have to have some expectation that they're going to need to talk about you sometimes. I think that's reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable to say you can't talk about our relationship with anybody else. Like that's just like exactly what Sunjata just, that's unrealistic because we're humans and we can't always see the issue if we're in the issue. Right. And it's so much more helpful to have a trusted, hopefully neutral person to kind of, bounce things off of. And the person who I think he's referring to is that person for a lot of people. And they don't, I think the term we've used to describe them before is brick house. Like they lock your secrets up in there.
It's like a vault.
They'll be able to compartmentalize and give advice. And they are using the information that they know from the other people to give advice, but without revealing the other person's like exact words when they vent, etc. So I think that's really important. I think those people are important in community and everybody has them. But I understand, I think for some people, saying, please don't tell anybody this is that feels like a boundary, right? If I ask you not to tell somebody something and you do, I'm now not going to trust you with any more of my, secrets. I'm putting that in quotes. So I think it's important for us to have our own agreements, our own boundaries that make sense for us and they align with our tolerance and our communication style, our tolerance for being talked about and our communication style.
Yeah. And I want to say,
Oh, and I will say, I don't mind when somebody's talking about their issue with me, but I do sometimes mind if somebody's talking about my issue with somebody else. I hope that makes sense. So if somebody's talking about me in reference, and they are the main character in the story, that's okay. But if somebody's talking about me and I'm the main character in the story, I don't like that because I want to be the person to give my own perspective. So I hope that makes sense.
Let me go deeper on that really quick to give like a real example, I think, of what I think you're saying.
Okay.
So I think what I hear you saying is like if I'm talking to someone and I'm like, because you and I have gone through something and I'm venting about it and I'm sharing how I felt and how it impacted me, you would be okay with that.
Yes.
But what you don't want is me talking to that same person about what you and another love is going through.
Exactly.
That's gossip.
Exactly.
That's gossip. I shouldn't be talking about this person over here about what Shani and her other love is going through.
Yeah.
That's not necessary.
Agreed.
And unless there's some type of agreement and understanding that there's trust.
Right.
And that those dynamics in the relationships are connected in a way where that makes sense. But if it doesn't, and it's just gossipy, that's not necessary.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to bring out is that sometimes there's been people in my life who kind of their knee jerk is, don't talk to anyone about this. Don't talk to anyone about this. And I'll clarify. If I'll say, well, is it okay if I talk to X person because I want to vent to them about this, or I need an outlet, instead of just willy nilly just agreeing to something I know I can't really consenting to something that I know I'm not going to be able to hold, and now I'm out of integrity. So in order to be in integrity, if someone is saying to me, don't talk to anyone about this, and I know that it's something that I'm going to need to vent to someone about, or let's say I think about it later and I know it's something I'm going to need an outlet for, I need to go to that person, and I have gone to that person, whether it's in a moment or later, and saying, you know what, this topic that you asked me not to mention, it feels like something I need to speak to someone else about to vent. Is that okay? This is who it's going to be. Is that okay? Like that level of communication, y'all, it can go a long way to, solidifying trust in your relationships.
And I think, a lot of people have trauma and fear around being open and vulnerable because they felt burned before. They
Yeah.
felt like somebody weaponized their, what they said, or there's so many things. I myself have a lot of those, like, fears and traumas of feeling like I opened up to somebody only for it to come back and smack me in the face. I felt like that myself. So I really do understand why people, hold on to privacy and confidentiality so like dearly. And I like what Sunjata said about communicating about what you need as well, even though somebody might have their traumas and have their fears, that you yourself have needs as well. So I think it's really important to evaluate what kind of agreements you can actually uphold and what you can't. So that was a really important point, I think.
Yeah, and another thing I want to advocate for in this conversation, or bring to the light, is a conversation I have had with people close to me when they have, like, their traumas around this has come up. One of the things that I've said is, like, it's not always realistic that everything you share is not going to get out. And I feel like if someone is afraid that what they say could ruin a future potential connection, I feel like there's some room for some self-work in that and some self-healing in that. And I feel like it's worth questioning, is that a realistic thought? Is that a realistic thought, or is that thought in my best interest? Because one of the things that I think to myself is, if there's someone out there that's going to hear about something I said or did and choose to create space and not want to get to know me as a result, that's okay. Because to me, that signals that they're saying, you know what, that's going to be a misalignment between me and Sunjata. So he's someone that I probably shouldn't or wouldn't want to get close to. And on my end, I have to be okay with that and trust, again, that who is for me is for me. And I've been in a relationship or I've known people that have really been scared about other people, this, like, future people, hypothetical people that they don't even really know yet, or people in our non-monogamous community here in the Atlanta area, hearing something about them and being really, really afraid that it's going to impede them from wanting to get to know that person. And I've always seen it differently. I've always seen it where, people have been open to getting to know folks based on their individual desire and experience with the people, and understanding that we're human. And where one person may clash with another person, that doesn't mean they're going to clash with me. That doesn't mean me and this person may not have, certain alignments that's going to make us have a dope connection. So I just feel like, if that's you and you're watching this and you have this, like, fear that something that happens between you and a person is going to get out and it may impact your potential of getting to know other people, I just feel like that's something worth interrogating within yourself. And I'm open to being wrong about that, y'all. And, share it in the comments. And this leads to the next thing I want to talk about, is the communication alignment spectrum, because that's ultimately what it's going to, boil down to, where you're going to notice that you're in a relationship with some people who are just naturally more, let's say, comfortable in their skin in the ways I just explain how I am. Some people who are just more open, sharing, and things like that. And then some people who are on the one end of the spectrum, the other end of the spectrum, they're like, I don't want to be talked about at all. I don't talk about other people at all. I don't want to be talked about at all, etc. And they're really like, close to the vest in terms of what they want to say about other people and what they want said about them for whatever reason. And instead of butting heads with a potential love or a potential partner or connection about how y'all move, I think this is a really good, telltale sign on how close, people can be for one another in terms of where they fall on that communication alignment spectrum.
I think it depends on the topic as well. Because speaking for myself personally, you can definitely talk about anything I said, and I'll happily provide context if needed. But I don't want people talking about my finances. So like, if I tell somebody anything about my, finances, I don't want to hear other people talking about that. Like, to me, that's private. And that's why I don't share it with a lot of people. And that's why I also pay attention to how much people share about other people's financial situations with me, because I'm not super comfortable even hearing about other people's, especially hardship, right? Especially financial hardship. Now, that's something that's like ingrained in me that I'm not open about because of the way I was raised and because of trauma and because of like conditioning. And I recognize that, but it's also just an area of alignment. There are some people who don't care if you talk about their money at all. You can tell anybody about how much money they make, and they even, they talk about it, but they don't want you talking about what they told you. And I'm the opposite. So there's lots of little moving pieces to evaluate and assess when you're trying to get to understand this whole idea of a communication alignment spectrum, or where y'all agree and where y'all don't agree on what should be talked about. I think it's good to communicate about these things, but I also just think it's good to observe too. I think it's a little bit of both, because sometimes you can't really change how someone feels about certain types of communication. And if you tell somebody that you don't want them talking about this, but it's already in their like habit to talk about it, it's going to be really hard for them to break that habit. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, be yourself, allow yourself to be who you are, and also allow other people to be who they are when it comes to this.
Yeah, I've seen people post like, or say when they get called out or called in about, I wish you wouldn't have said that. They're like, I just don't know what I can and what I can't share. Like, some people really struggle with finding that balance. And I think in those instances, again, that's where you have to be mindful of what you share with that person and not put it on them. At the end of the day, it's all about self accountability in this. As you're getting to know people and you're learning, how they communicate and, what they say, it's either self accountability and not sharing certain things with them, or self accountability with making sure that you signal that something is confidential by saying, this is confidential. Please don't share it with anyone else.
I think, while we're just to get a little sidebar here, I think when it also comes to sharing like photos and video and stuff like that, it should be assumed that anything kind of racy or sexual, to me, that should be assumed confidential, unless, sometimes I might be like, hey, can I show this picture of something of us to, my friend? I might ask that. And if he says, okay, then yay. But I assume that that's private. I assume that doesn't want to be shared. So what do you think? Good time for our segment, or what are you thinking? You have something to say about that?
Yeah, no, this is a good time for the segment.
The segment is story time today. And Sujata's going to tell us a little bit of a story. I'm going to let him give you guys the context.
Yeah, so, perfect for this topic because, I had a love that at one point, or let's say I have a love of someone that I'm, in relationship with, that at one point that relationship was more close proximity, more romantic. And, we were spending a lot of time together during the getting to know you process, and just at one point really falling into like a partnership dynamic and a romantic partnership dynamic. And this person was, very, very like extroverted, life of the party type person. And that what came with that was this person would say anything at any moment. And you just never knew. I'll say I never knew when it was going to happen. And it wasn't just unique to me, it was really unique to anyone that was in this person's life. And, or something they did, no matter, for anyone in their life. So what was interesting though, there was times when this person would say certain things. I would say that for me personally, I definitely wouldn't share it. It would be something that for me it would be more private. Often that would fall within like a sexual domain. There were some things in the sexual domain that if it was said out loud in front of a group of people, I didn't mind or wouldn't feel any type of way about. But there were certain things that gave me more of like a little cringe, feeling like, okay, I definitely wouldn't have shared that. And that makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable that it was shared, but that's just that person being that person. And at the end of the day, here's what I could say, because I really feel like it's really good with this conversation because, we're always learning, right? We're always learning things about ourselves and we're learning things about other people within these dynamics. And ultimately, I never went to that person and said, don't share those type of things, because at the end of the day, where it was a little bit beyond my comfort zone, it was still in my range of tolerance. It was still within my range of tolerance. If it would have gotten beyond my range of tolerance and it would have bumped up into a place where it felt like it was crossing some like personal boundary or it made me feel like oppressed or othered or whatever in any type of way, I would have spoken up. So ultimately, it did make me feel uncomfortable. It was beyond what I would have deemed private. What I deemed private and what I would share about myself to other people. But hearing that person share it still was like, but within the group of people were shared around, it was still in my range of tolerance.
Oh my gosh. I remember one time we were in a group setting and she said something and I was like, oh! Like I could not, and I'm not a prude, okay? But I couldn't believe the way, it was just so casual, the way she just kind of revealed something that I would have thought was deeply personal. I remember I looked at him like, and he was just like, I mean, your face was like, but then you were like, all right, okay, and I will say it's one of the things I admire because you got a lot of tolerance for that. He actually is kind of private. Like, I would think if she had shared any of those things on social media, that would have been outside your range of tolerance.
Hell
but
yeah.
I feel like the reason it was tolerated by him is because the circle of people was relatively close. It wasn't like 6 degrees of separation away. It was only like 1 or 2 degrees of separation away. So I think that contributed to it. But
Definitely.
she definitely shocked me with some of the things she would just reveal at a at like random dinner conversation. I'd be like, and I'd be looking at him too, like, okay, that's what you're doing. I learned some things about him in that way. Okay, I wasn't mad about it.
Yeah, and you mentioned like, I am private about a lot of things, and especially when it comes to like sexual things that my capacities in those ways. I'm not broadcasting those things. I've said more on this podcast in season 1 and season 2 about my sex life. It's more in my range of tolerance that I'm surprised that I would share, but I still kept it to a level that again, it fell within my range of tolerance. Y'all ain't get everything. You ain't get everything. You got a lot, but you ain't get everything.
You gotta save some things that the public don't get to know about him. I'm with it. I feel you. I'm in the same kind of boat.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a fun one. I really hope y'all took something away and learned something about not just polyamory. I try not to limit it to that because this really applies to all kinds of relationships. I could see this applying to work relationships as well. A lot of times at work, you get something that's confidential, and if you're talking about it with other people, you can be in huge trouble. And there are private conversations at work, and so there's lots of different ways that this can apply. We just happen to be talking about it in the non-monogamous context. But I always like to point that out, that relationships are just relationships, and we have this kind of exceptionalism when it comes to romance that we don't have in other relationships. However, a lot of the same concepts apply. So I just want to throw that out there, and I hope that this was helpful for y'all, and it's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure, y'all. And as always, you see the shirt. Until next time, I'm on the wrong side. Until next time, I love y'all. Peace.
Bye, y'all.
That's a wrap for this episode of SunShan and Rainbows. We hope today's conversation sparked some new insights, deep reflections, or just gave you a fresh perspective on love and connection.
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop us a comment, send us your questions, or share your own experiences. We might even feature them in a future episode.
And don't forget to subscribe to SunShan and Rainbows on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you're vibing with us, please like, comment, share, and leave a review. It helps others find the show and keeps these conversations going.
Want more sunshine and rainbows? Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Sunshan Rainbows for daily insights, behind the scenes moments, and updates on future episodes. You can get more in depth and intellectual with us on our Substack, sustainablesolutionsmedia.com. If you like what we're saying over there, consider becoming a paid subscriber to support all our liberation and anti oppression efforts.
As always, thank you for rocking with us. We so appreciate the love and support. Until next time, we love y'all. Peace.